I wanted to ask, you said that the Muslims could sort of provide some spiritual um, guidance to what is taking place in the West right now. But do you think this is prevalent in our societies as is? Because I feel like
Mm,
we need to do a lot of reflection on our end.
that's right. That's a very good point. Unfortunately, what's happened in many Muslim countries is that the youth often associate whoever has the power with the truth. And so they think that, well, the West has the power, therefore let's go ahead and, imitate them in all their secular approaches to science and so forth, without being aware of the philosophical presuppositions behind that, and without being aware of what the Islamic intellectual tradition is about. So absolutely, we have to recover that. But in a sense, it has not been lost in the Islamic world itself, nearly to the degree that it's been lost to the West. I mean, there's no comparison. For example, the very fact that you have Hastoneest is proof that it's not been lost in the Islamic world. The very fact that we have people like Sayyid Hussein Nasr or Sheikh Ali Gum'a or other intellectuals is proof that we haven't lost it in the Islamic world. What's happened in the Islamic world is that this traditional perspective has been moved to the periphery. It's not at the center. It used to be at the center. But as a result of colonization, the secular system moved to the center, and then the traditional Islamic approach was moved to the periphery. So it's not dead in the Islamic world. We'd like to move things to the center rather than the periphery, but that's going to require a lot of education.
Do we have any current examples in current times, or maybe a couple of decades ago, something that we did or we could look up done from this perspective?
Yes, I mean, even what you're doing at Hastoneest, studying traditional art and architecture, and as you're going to be relating this to the traditional Islamic cosmological sciences and the symbolism, the meanings of things and so forth, and within the traditional guild system that exists still in certain parts of the world. I'll give you an example from Egypt because I'm more familiar with what's going on in Egypt since I'm Egyptian. Oh, that looks very nice. I'll participate vicariously with you. In Egypt, for example, the largest non-governmental organization in Egypt is Masr al-Khair, which has a division. It's doing amazing work, and I won't go into all the details of it, but one of the aspects of its work is precisely the preservation, recovery and preservation of these traditional arts within Egypt. Because you have some of these craftsmen who are very elderly, and they know these crafts and the symbolism and the meaning behind it, but they're elderly, and if that knowledge is not passed on to the next generation, then those arts and crafts and the meaning behind them can die. So Masr al-Khair is working to establish that. Now, even when you go into traditional mosque architecture, when it comes to, for example, something based on Mamluk design, you have architects who are developing, and of course, you have a living example right next to you. Right? It's about traditional art, and architecture is very central. And so there are pockets in which this is being discussed and implemented within the Islamic world, and we just have to kind of try to bring that to the center rather than the periphery. But we need intellectual clarity about it first, and to kind of reach a larger scale or audience. And I think that if we can establish some currency here, it will help, in a sense, to get to popularize this more in the Islamic world. For example, if we have many Westerners who are hungry for this type of approach, because many Westerners feel the spiritual emptiness, and so they're looking for alternatives. And if that becomes more well known here, and I do believe it's spreading, that can, in a sense, trigger something within the Islamic world itself. So I think it's both ends. It's yin yang. I mean, they complement each other. So I view my main objective here is to write for establishing the theoretical clarity on these issues, and there's a lot of interfaith interest in this type of work. And on the basis of that, hopefully it can have some complement what's already going on in the Islamic world.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I have a quick question, if you still have time.
Yes, of course.
It's a twofold question. One is that I understand you're saying we need to, that currency that you were talking about, do you mean it in a more figurative way, or do you mean a real money currency?
Oh, no. Well, right now I was just talking about the figuratively.
Right. So my question is that we have a dearth of intellectual, perhaps institutes which cultivate thinkers, in the sense that people who are well equipped with the current financial model in most, or economic model in most countries. At the same time, what the Sharia principles that you were talking about, especially in the beginning of the class, that it should be based on the spiritual and a similar model. So my question is, so what are we doing at this stage, or what do you think we should do at this stage to cultivate such thinkers who can at the end bring some sort of reform within the system? Because right now all our economic systems are tied to mostly, let's say, the US. We don't have the gold standard anymore. Everything is based on the M1, M2, M3, and so forth, the monetary system. So it's so, and a lot of money, for example, for Pakistan comes from Western countries at this stage. So what can we do in terms of bringing reform in our economic model while we have these financial limitations? That's the first thing. Yeah. And the second thing, what can we do intellectually in the sense that while we are only obsessed right now with how many rakkas we have in Isha, rather than focusing on these larger problems, what can we do to cultivate that intellectual thought process?
Yes. Well, the second question is doing exactly what you're doing right now. Really, each one of you, what you learn in Hastoneest, if you spread that to 10 people and they spread it to 10 people and so forth and so on, that can become a major catalyst for change. I know that takes time, and not everybody is going to be, in a sense, intellectually oriented towards these types of issues. But if there is change among the intellectual elite, that is really the catalyst for the change in all of society. Dr. Nasr often says that, what is it that secularized the whole of Western thought? It was 40 of these intellectuals, if you want to call them that, who could not find the answers to the questions that they had within the religious tradition. And so they started looking for these answers outside of religion, and that led to the secularization of thought. This book by Wolfgang Smith basically shows that there's only one way to resolve quantum paradox. No other way is going to do it. we have to drop Cartesian bifurcation, and it requires vertical causality, and it changes the whole face of physics. He shows how vertical causality is involved in both the subject that knows and the object that's known. This book is an enormous game changer. It's incredible in its implications. A book like this, if it gets circulation and is known, can change intellectual history. And so in my religion and science course, we do this book. In addition to the work of Dr. Nasr on the need for a sacred science, as well as E.F. Schumacher's A Guide for the Perplexed and some other traditional works that basically changed this whole discourse on the relationship between religion and science. And if that discourse is changed, then it changes everything else.
Correct.
So I'm hopeful that I'm grateful to Allah that I lived to the point that I would see a book like this come out. And that I'm telling all the, basically, I teach at a Catholic Jesuit university, and they have many universities in the United States, and through the whole Catholic network, I'm trying to promote this book as much as possible. I hope that through works like this and the works of Dr. Nasr, it can do that. That's for the second part of the question regarding intellectual change. So intellectual change, if we can change the minds of the elite, that's going to have, I think, a huge impact. When it comes to the practical constraints, that's going to follow after the structures change. And quite frankly, I like to joke that there's a short-term solution and a long-term solution. The long-term solution is the Mahdi and Isa alayhi salam coming. That's the long term.
Correct.
We do have shorter term things that we can try to do, that low-hanging fruit, so to speak, that doesn't require changing the whole structure of the system. And then there's the intermediate stuff. But the most important thing is that we just try to interrupt whatever patterns that we can. The current patterns. If we can just cause these changes that kind of interrupt things at the local, at some level. And I know it's going to be extremely difficult to do, and it's going to take time. And so I don't have any illusions about that, but Allah is not going to hold us responsible for things that are out of our control. But he is going to ask us for things that are in our control, and so we should just do our best. And every act that we do, even if it, outwardly doesn't change everything as much as we'd like, just asserting the truth is something that has tremendous repercussions. So we should go and do our duty and try to implement things to whatever extent that we can, and not be concerned with the results. That's in Allah's hands. We just do what we're supposed to do, and don't even wait for the results.
Yes, very beautifully put.
Thank you, Doctor.
Dr. Waleed. Thank you very much. We should say good night to you now.
All
Must
right.
be very late for you. 1:15 in the morning.
Oh, wow. Anyway, the time went by quickly. I was enjoying it. But maybe we should recite Surah Al-Asr just to cover ourselves in case we said anything wrong. Would anybody like to recite that, or?
You can recite.
All right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
جزاك الله بارك الله.
بارك الله فيكم. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you. Thank you.